2 weeks. That's all it took for Detroit Lions training camp to completely rewrite the storylines this fanbase walked in with back in late July. Pads have been on for about a week now, the hitting has gotten real, and something fascinating has started to happen out there in Allen Park. The assumptions everybody made heading into camp? Some of them just got obliterated. Others turned out to be true, but in a completely different way than anyone expected. Today, Detroit Scope is doing a full reset. We're walking through the 5 biggest lessons this training camp has taught us so far about how this new-look Lions team is actually going to operate in 2026, and trust us, a few of these are going to genuinely surprise you. This isn't the surface level who looked good in shorts content you get everywhere else. This is the behind-the-curtain breakdown that actually tells you how games are going to be won and lost this season. Let's start with lesson number 1, and honestly, this might be the single biggest overreaction correction of the entire camp. The cornerback room is significantly deeper than anybody gave it credit for. Rewind the tape to the start of camp, and the mood around this position group was borderline panic. Terrion Arnold was gone from the mix. The Lions were staring down a group anchored by Rock Yacine and a still unproven Ennis Rakestraw, with a pile of question marks stacked up behind them. A lot of fans, reasonably, wanted this front office to go out and add a proven veteran immediately, no questions asked. Fast forward 2 weeks, and the entire picture looks different. Rock Yacine has looked exactly like what this defense needs, a physical, dependable presence who might not be a Pro Bowler, but is unquestionably a legitimate starting caliber corner in this league. And Ennis Rakestraw? His talent was never really the question. Everybody who watched him coming out knew the ability was real. The question was always health, and right now, by every indication, he appears to be in the best shape of his career, getting real first-team representatives and flashing the kind of sticky coverage that made him such a highly regarded prospect in the first place. But here's the real headline buried inside all of that. And it's a name that started camp as a complete afterthought. Nick Whiteside. This was a guy people genuinely wondered would even make the 53-man roster back in July. 2 weeks in, that conversation has flipped entirely, to the point where there is now real, legitimate buzz that Whiteside could push for an actual starting job on the outside before this whole thing is said and done. Think about that for a second. That is an enormous jump in perception for any player to make in just 14 days of camp. Now, none of this means Detroit should sit completely pat and call the cornerback room finished. Adding one more trustworthy veteran body for depth still makes plenty of sense, and don't be shocked if that conversation resurfaces closer to the trade deadline if a real need emerges during the season. But the panic that surrounded this position group back in July has been almost entirely erased by what has actually shown up on the practice field. Lesson number 2 takes us up front, to the defensive line, and this one flips the script in a slightly different way. Coming into camp, there was real, genuine concern specifically about the interior of this defensive line. The classic worry that Detroit simply didn't have enough true, prototypical, mountain-sized nose tackle bodies to plug those interior gaps against power-running teams. But here's what actually changed the entire way we need to think about this problem. It was never really about finding one more massive nose tackle. It's about versatility. Tyler Lacey is showing he can hold up at the nose spot in obvious run situations and then kick out to the edge in different looks entirely. Alim McNeill is showing that exact same kind of positional flexibility, capable of setting the edge against one style of offensive tackle, then sliding back inside in a completely different package. Levi Onwuzurike looks healthy and disruptive again after battling through his own injury history. And rookie Skylar Gilhoward is emerging as a legitimate interior pass rush specialist, someone who can win one-on-one matchups against guards in obvious passing situations. The entire mental model needs to shift here. This isn't a defensive line built around one designated player for one designated role. This is a defensive line built to move pieces around depending on the exact matchup, the exact offensive line in front of them, and the exact situation on any given down. That kind of scheme flexibility is significantly harder for an opposing offensive coordinator to game plan around than a static, predictable rotation. And it's a real credit to this coaching staff for building the room this way from the jump. Now let's get into lesson number 3, because this is genuinely the one that could reshape how you watch this entire defense play out all season long. Everybody assumed that with a new defensive philosophy in place under coordinator Kelvin Shepard, the Lions were going to dramatically ramp up their use of nickel personnel, joining the rest of the league, which leans on that extra defensive back package far more often than Detroit historically has. Under this coaching staff's defensive approach in recent years, Detroit ran nickel on roughly a third of their snaps, well below the league average. The expectation heading into this season was that number was going to spike dramatically, maybe climbing all the way up towards 75%, matching most modern NFL defenses. What camp has actually shown, though, is a much more modest shift, probably landing somewhere in the 40 to 50% range rather than a full wholesale transformation. Yes, you will absolutely see more nickel looks than in years past, and that's exactly where newcomers like Christian Isian and Roger McCreary can carve out real value. But this defense is still going to lean heavily on base personnel and man coverage principles as its foundation. This matters more than it might sound like on the surface, because it completely changes the evaluation lens for this secondary heading into the regular season. If you walked into this offseason expecting a total system overhaul, temper that expectation right now. What Detroit is doing here is an evolution, not a revolution. Let the offensive-minded fans in this audience very, very happy. Multiple tight end sets are here to stay, and they are here in a big way. There was some chatter earlier in the offseason trying to downplay how much this offense would actually lean on those two tight end packages, with some pointing to modest usage rates from these new coaches' previous stops around the league. Training camp has firmly put that chatter to rest. The Lions are running a significant amount of what's called 12 and 13 personnel, meaning one or two running backs paired with multiple tight ends on the field at the same time. And now that Tyler Conklin is fully back and healthy, expect to see even more of it as the season rolls on. Conklin, by the way, is a name worth knowing. A Michigan native, Chesterfield-born and Central Michigan-bred, signed this offseason to add proven depth behind Sam Laporta. This creates an offense that can plug in Brock Wright, Conklin, and, if he makes the final roster, Jackson Meeks, all working together in different combinations to keep opposing defenses constantly guessing about run versus pass before the ball is even snapped. This is a real, foundational building block of the offensive identity under new offensive coordinator Drew Petzing and passing game coordinator Mike Kafka, and it's going to be a staple every single week this season. And now, lesson number 5, maybe the single most exciting development to come out of the entire camp for anybody who has watched this offense struggle with one specific problem in recent years. The Lions are genuinely, intentionally pushing the football down the field more often. Every single day of camp has featured at least a couple of Jared Goff shot plays loaded up and launched deep downfield, and it does not appear to be forced or accidental. It appears to be a real, deliberate part of the new offensive plan taking shape under Petzing and Kafka. This has been a glaring, gaping hole in this offense for a while now. Under the previous coordinator arrangement, that deep, vertical element of the passing game just wasn't part of the weekly play-calling menu. Whether that was by scheme philosophy, or frankly because the offensive line simply couldn't hold up long enough to let a deep route fully develop downfield. With the offensive line significantly retooled and improved this offseason, and with Mike Kafka's fingerprints all over these new passing concepts working alongside Petzing, it finally looks like this coaching staff has both the personnel and the actual game plan to let Goff air it out on a consistent, weekly basis. If that element becomes a real, sustainable weapon in this offense throughout the season, it opens up an entirely new dimension for a passing attack that was already considered among the best in all of football. So step all the way back and look at the full picture these 5 lessons paint together, because it's a genuinely compelling snapshot of where this team stands right now. A quarterback room and cornerback room that quietly solved a lot of their own question marks without a single outside addition. A defensive line built on flexibility rather than rigid, predictable roles. A defensive scheme that's evolving gradually and intentionally, rather than flipping overnight into something unrecognizable. An offense fully committing to multiple tight end sets as a real, weekly weapon. And a passing attack that is finally, genuinely stretching the field vertically for the first time in years. None of this is speculation. None of this is hope dressed up as analysis. This is what has actually shown up on the practice field through the first 2 weeks of camp, and it paints the picture of a coaching staff that has a clear, well-thought-out plan for this roster heading into the preseason opener. A plan that goes well beyond just plugging talented players into a scheme and hoping for the best. Of course, we have to stay grounded here too. We're still early. Pads have only been on for about a week, and there's a preseason game right around the corner that's going to tell us even more, especially since this coaching staff will likely want to show at least a taste of these wrinkles, even inside what's expected to be a fairly vanilla preseason opening script against Cincinnati. But the takeaways from these first 2 weeks are about as encouraging as this fan base could have realistically hoped for heading into a season with genuine Super Bowl expectations attached to it. So here's what we want to know from you. Which of these 5 takeaways surprised you the most? Are you buying the idea that Nick Whiteside could actually push for a starting cornerback job by the time September rolls around? Are you as excited as we are about the deep ball finally becoming a real, consistent weapon in this offense after years of watching it sit on the shelf? Drop it in the comments below. We read every single one, and we're pulling some of your questions directly into future videos. And listen, we know this channel is still growing, and we need your help to get there. Detroit Scope is working toward hitting 1,000 subscribers, and every single person who hits that subscribe button gets us one step closer. If this breakdown helped you see camp a little differently today, go ahead and smash that like button right now, drop your thoughts down in the comments, and if you're not subscribed yet, get on board, because we've got a preseason opener coming up fast and a whole lot more analysis on the way. Until next time, this is Detroit Scope, and as always, go Lions.